Welcome to another episode of the Property Chat. In our last episode and our very first episode, we featured Mafipe Chunga, who did 1 Square K. As you know, the Property Chat is about featuring real estate developers, young real estate Zambian developers who are doing out-of-the-box type of real estate within Lusaka. Today, we're very fortunate to be joined by Angelika, who is synonymous with Foxdale Court and Foxdale Forest, which we're seated at today. Beautiful, serene, my kind of scene, I think. Thank you very much, Angelika, for agreeing to be part of the Property Chat and sharing your journey with us. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, so Angelika, I'm a mum, a working mum, and trying to balance all of the, juggle and keep it all going.
Yes.
What do you want to know? Background? Where did I?
Yes.
I think I guess I feel as though I grew up in a pile of building sand.
Yes.
When I was growing up. So my parents were always building. Through my childhood. I guess I never actually formally studied construction or architecture or real estate at all, but just sort of landed into it.
Okay.
So fire more questions away.
Yes, I will. We have lots to talk about and lots to ask, because I'm sure a lot of people, myself included, would really like to get an understanding of your journey. So was Foxdale Court your first commercial development?
Yeah. So I started Foxhole Court when I was 23.
Wow.
So I had I guess my educational background, I'm Zambian, born and grew up in Zambia. My mum is Zambian, originally from the north in Chinsali area.
Yes.
My dad is Swiss, but I'm Zambian, born and grew up here. I went to LICS, the ISL, the American school, and then when I was 18, I went to university in the UK, and I was there for 6 years. So my undergraduate degree, I studied at Imperial College London. I studied business management for my undergrad, and then for my master's, I studied fashion buying, and I was very much on a fashion track. Knew what I wanted, and I was like going for it. I did lots of internships while I was studying.
Okay.
So during my first year of university, I've always been very focused and determined. And my mum says, I actually see it on my daughter's face. She's always got this really serious face on her. And I'm like, oh my God, that's me. I can see myself when I was sort of 3 years old, because I suppose I've just always been like that. So. So from my first year of university, I had an internship at Land Rover. They took me all around. I saw Birmingham, and we went to all these different shows, Stratford upon Avon, but it was all this sort of lots of sales, but quite tough. A bit of a man's world, I guess, but it was a fantastic experience. I went to some of their marketing meetings, and I could see kind of like the behind the scenes, what was going on. Second year I worked, at that point I knew I wanted to go into fashion. So I worked at Store Models, which is a modeling agency in London. It's Kate Moss's modeling agency. That was a brilliant experience as well. And then during my third year of university, I worked in New York at Eden, which is Bono's wife's company. Bono, the YouTube singer. So his wife has this fantastic company called Eden, where it's apparel, clothing made in developing countries, but designed in New York, where they have the head office. So I worked there and bummed on my sister's couch, who was living in New York at the time. I did my master's degree then in fashion buying, because I knew that I wanted to work in the business side of the fashion industry, and the buying was the perfect way to sort of bridge the business side and fashion. So I did my master's degree at Istituto Morangoni. It was a 1-year master's, and when I finished that, I then had an internship at Erdem. He's a very well-renowned UK designer. I was his personal assistant. So that was really fun. At that time, David Cameron was the Prime Minister in the UK, so Samantha Cameron came in, and I was a personal assistant, so making cups of tea and washing up bits and pieces, but also fitting models. And so that was buying lunch for my boss and all that sort of fun stuff that you just have to do, and it's great. You build up great experience. I do loads of deliveries as well. So just jump on a bus with a heavy box of clothes, but go behind to the delivery area of Harrods and Selfridges and Browns. So it was really great stores, and that was quite fun. Just have good chats with the delivery guys there. So I did that, and then I did that for about 3 months, and I got an internship at Prada in London. So I was in their head office in Mayfair, Curzon Street. Had a second-hand bicycle that I bought from Brick Lane for £20, and I would cycle to work.
Yes.
Yeah, brace the Duke of Wellington Square on my bicycle with all the buses. Arrived terribly sweaty.
Yes.
So that was an incredible experience as well, and that was a lot of number crunching. So I was working in retail control. They have 12 stores. At that time, they had 12 stores in London. I had to do this huge Bible of their basically of their store statistics, just looking at foot flow, average value per transaction, and anyway, putting this giant Excel model together. So that was great, just to sort of build those like number crunching skills as well, and do some big statistics and graphs. And after that, I had met my my now husband, sort of in between the whole mix of all that was going on, and he has a company called Courtyard Capital, which is a venture capital, finance, corporate advisory company. And we met, and we actually met in Zambia, but he sort of just got the Zambia bug, the Africa bug. And when we both finished our master's degrees, he said, "Angelika, I'm moving to Zambia."
Oh, wow.
And actually at that time, I felt I hadn't quite got enough of London. I still wanted to sort of grind away and do a bit more work there. But he had booked his ticket, and he's like, "I'm on my way." So I was like, "All right, then let me finish Erdem, because I've got Prada internship lined up. Okay, I'll do it for 3 months just to gain that experience." And then I moved down to Zambia. He was living with my mum. He moved in with my mum, so I moved into, moved in with my mum and my now husband. And then I guess and then from there, it sort of transitioned into real estate. But it all happened quite quickly. And then I'd always had this dream of setting up a shop called Zovala. And I through my university and all, I'd done loads of business plan challenge, and I think I was actually like Mrs. Zovala for at least 5 6 years of my sort of university. And sort of sat with my mum, when I just came down, and I said, where am I going to open the store then? And my mom said, go to Manda Hill or Arcades, find a nice little shop there. And I said, I'll never open up a shop in a mall. It needs to be some rustic house that I then renovate. And she said, okay, well, why don't you take the 609 house, which is what we called it at that time, which is where Foxdale Court is located. And that house, it had been in our family. It was the original farmhouse, which started on the corner of Zambias and Mulungushi Road, and it went all the way to the end of Roma Park, which my parents bought 30 years ago. So it was the original farmhouse there. And so I was like, okay, that sounds great, because it was this beautiful house with arches, and there was a barn at the back. And so I thought, okay, I could have the shop in the barn. And I guess that was probably day one of Foxdale Court, what Foxdale Court is now. I sort of moved in the next day, and we took the tractor driver and the tractor, and we mowed the lawn, because the house had been empty for a bit of time. The grass was, 2 meters high, and just started sort of working away at it. So it had this big barn, and it had a cottage that had been rented out before as offices. And so I started renovating it with the idea of having a store. And then things just happened quite quickly. Then I sort of said that I knew the reality of the fashion industry. Some people make it in fashion and have a good income from fashion. But there's the majority of people, it is a bit of a challenging life, or income-wise, if you go into fashion. And I had seen my bosses at Prada, and they were living in flat shares. That's the reality. They were like living in professional flat shares in kind of their late 30s, early 40s. And I was also like, okay, it is challenging in fashion. So I thought, let me renovate the house and into offices, rent out the offices, and then have that income, and then I can go and do my fashion projects. And that all happened, in the space of 2-3 days. Things were happening very quickly at this point. And then so my husband was setting up Kukula, that's what he was doing, and he was looking for office space. He was looking for small office space because he was a small company. We had a very little, a small group, sort of 5 people, and he was looking for 50 to 100 square meters of office space, which, and ideally he wanted to be on sort of the sort of the eastern side of town. But at that time, there just wasn't small office space in Lusaka. It's like 200 square meters minimum. Average office space was sort of 400 square meters. It's like, okay. So he ended up going to Kulima Tower. In town, where he found a 50 square meter office, and then, you know, within a month or 2 expanded to 70 square meters. Which
and
is
how
sort
much
of
rent was he paying? Did you know at that time?
I mean, Kulima Tower is probably like $10 per square meter or something like that.
Yes. And
it's
probably
quite,
all the other space was probably at the $22.
Yeah, at that time, yeah, $22, $25 per square meter, but. He could afford $22, $25,
but
if it was 50 square meters or 70 square meters, 100 square meters. Yeah. But the minimum was sort of like 200 square meters.
So that's this. Then this birthed the idea of let's build small office space.
So I basically realized that there's a gap for small office space on this eastern side of town.
Yes.
And then I was like, okay, well, I've got some land here. I've got 1 hectare on this eastern side of town, and I was already now sort of thinking of renovating this house into offices, and I said, okay, I'm going to build an office complex. And it literally was just that.
So you just bulldozed down the house?
And no, we kept the house.
You
and
kept
the house is actually still there. So where Fox and Hound is, that's the original house.
Oh.
And we kept it for, you know, and literally the Fox and Hound has been renovated.
Yes.
They took away the arches. So the house had these beautiful Spanish arches, which is what inspired the architecture of Foxdale Court. And so, yes, when Fox and Hound was renovated by a tenant, they sort of incorporated the arches into the sort of the bigger picture of the house. So the arches are no longer there. But those walls, the existing walls, it's still that
old original house, 30 years plus.
Yeah, more than that.
More
it was
than
in
that.
the 60s.
In the 60s, so 50 years old.
50 years old, yeah.
So tell me, did you decide to build as much office space, or what made the decision to build retail, and how many stories of office space? You have 3 stories, 2 stories up of office space.
Yeah.
Was the intention, was that the intention in the beginning, or was that something that began to evolve as you started building and getting more insight in the market?
So it did take me 9 months to sort of plan it all out. And my mum helped me with a loan to build the development. So, you know, so I had a certain budget, and my budget was enough to sort of build 2 stories. I definitely would have run short even with 2 stories, because projects always run over budget. But it was like, okay, I spoke with the different contractors, and they're like, you know, $600 per square meter, you're roughly, this is what you can do. And then at that point, my husband said, he's in finance, and he said, look, okay, I'll come on board and we can help get some other investors in. And it was sort of him that said, let's maximize, you know, use the land as much as possible, and let's rather go 3 stories. Okay. I didn't have the money to do 3 stories, but he's like, okay, let's do that. And so it was a 3-story building. And I guess what inspired the architecture of Foxhole Court is I really wanted to do something which I felt was authentic. And I was researching and thinking a lot about what is authentic African or Zambian architecture. Yeah. And also just looking at the Southern African continent as well. And I feel like construction, I think and whether it's construction or fashion, but I think it's so much tied to our identity, and also our national identity. And literally, I hated the arcade, you know, not arcades, but like the Monday, just these strip malls that you just see just rolled out. And I feel they're just sort of such copy and paste models. So it was definitely not going to be one of those. And I kind of went to the architects and worked with them, and I sort of showed them buildings that inspired me. And I've always been inspired, I suppose, by history. I showed them sort of old buildings that I liked. And they just came back to me with a strip mall. And I was like, no, this just isn't what it's supposed to be. And then, but the main thing that inspired the architecture was that it was looking at the original house and drawing inspiration from that. It had sort of these Spanish arches, sort of Spanish Portuguese, that's sort of Mediterranean, I guess, style. Then I started to think about about Mozambique. When I first met my husband, we did a month-long road trip with some other friends around Southern Africa. So the Zambia, Tanzania into Mozambique, and we drove all the way along the Mozambican coast to South Africa. And when we were in Ilha de Mozambique, which is just not far from Pemba, northern Mozambique, I was so inspired by the architecture there. It's this 400-year-old sort of Portuguese architecture, but I feel that is now entwined into our own identity, you know, as Zambians, Africans, Southern Africans, we have an English, history of architecture. We have our indigenous Zambian history of mud huts. And then I was looking at Mozambique, and they've got that Portuguese history. 400 years. It's a part of your history.
It's a part of your history. I mean, I think driving through Southern Africa, actually, you see that when you go into whether it's Mozambique, Malawi, Zambia, Zimbabwe, when you go into the rural areas, you can see that there's a very similar type of look and feel to the way people built, you know. So this then inspires you to build.
So basically, it when I was looking at these arches of the old farmhouse, it took me back to this trip we did in Mozambique. And there was a particular building which had these beautiful arches, and it was a yellow building. It was yellow with white, and I still have a picture of it. And there was a little pharmacy below it, and I kind of made that connection, and I was like, okay, that's it. And then I also thought about the building, you know, where the army had their head office as well on Independence Avenue, and that's also a sort of yellow-orange building with those arches, and I felt it fitted into the Zambian landscape. And I also feel, as a property developer, you have a responsibility, and I think you have a responsibility to build beautiful buildings that will last the test of time.
Exactly.
And maintain them so that they are
beautiful, and
buildings that are 1,000 years old. We can. There are some buildings that are 1,000 years old, but 400 years old. And I feel when you build, you should think with that perspective.
That's excellent. That's excellent.
So that's how it all came about.
That's how it all came about. Yeah. So it's nice to see that what you did was have the ability to take a family-owned asset and turn it into a retail development, an office park that today is bustling. I mean, it's really, really bustling. I assume you're almost 100% occupied. You've got a very nice combination of retail. I mean, originally spa, but now, of course, Pick n Pay bought the spa store over. You've got Fox and Hound. So it's become a nice area. I love the veranda that you have, where you could just sit, literally pick up a book and read. And you've got books on the bookshelf.
We do, and it's a little library. We don't have libraries in Zambia, so you can actually take a book off the bookshelf. The waiters, we've got in-house waiters, they will sign it out for you, and you can kind of bring it back.
So you can actually take it off?
You can, and you can sort of just write it down.
Wow, that's fantastic. So tell me, it took you 9 months to build Foxdale?
To plan it.
To plan it, yeah. That's a lot of time for planning, and I think a lot of people don't go into that level of planning. Why 9 months?
Yeah. Well, I guess the whole process of the plan was also raising the finance and putting a team together, and also the concept. But I guess if I speak a bit about the concept of Foxdale Court, so when I was working at Prada in London, what I loved about it was I had my office upstairs. I'd go downstairs to Sainsbury's. I'd buy a little, a little lunch pack from there, like a little salad. You know, there were little courtyards there. There were benches where you could sit and have your lunch, and then there was just a stone throw away. There was a dry cleaners. There was, and in the evening you could pop by a little cocktail bar, and it's like right there. And there's not the supermarket where you can sort of buy your milk and your bread on your way home. And I felt that in Zambia we always have this idea: it's either an office complex or a shopping center. And I kind of looked at the landscape, and it's like there's Monday Hill, and then there's maybe Airtel building. But people would jump in their cars from Airtel, drive over to Monday Hill to Hungry Lion, buy their lunch, and then drive back. And I've always been an environmentalist at heart. And Foxhole Court and Foxhole Forest, they're all green developments. And I just thought, this is nonsense, You can't be jumping in your car to drive across the road. And also wasting time, just the efficiency. So the concept from the beginning was always, it was small office space, but then having shops upstairs and and retail on your ground floor. So it's
yes.
kind of trying to recreate a bit of a high street.
All right.
And also just with the efficiency so that you can, if you do have a really busy day, I mean, now we've got waiters in the courtyard and you can literally give them a call. They actually come to your desk at 11 o'clock and they're like, what would you like? What would you like for lunch? And you can order from all the different eateries.
So are the waiters
bring it to
employed
your
by
desk.
Foxdale Court?
They are employed by Foxdale
And
Court,
how has that impacted your restaurants? Have they, I'm sure they've seen a positive.
Yeah, we monitor all this stuff and we
the statistics
getting them to sort of, we're like,
spreadsheets.
okay, we'll pay for it for the first year and then you need to start chipping in because we know it's going to increase your business.
Yes.
But yeah, so it was kind of creating that. It's also just creating life.
Yes.
You know, there's always life at Foxhole Court, and it's a different type of life. You know, people do say, Foxhole Court by day, Foxhole Court by night, but there's also Foxhole Court during the week and Foxhole Court during the weekend. Whereas you look at office complexes, and it's like busy from 8 to 6, 7 o'clock, and then it's quiet. And weekends it's quiet. Where we wanted to create life.
Yeah, your Sky Bar is quite popular with the young guys. It's very, very popular.
But just that whole mix. But also just the courtyard, getting people. Also, when you just have that day where you've been sitting in front of a computer and it's just all too much, pop down to the courtyard and have a coffee and treat yourself to an ice cream and a little muffin. And have meetings in the courtyard. It's a lovely space with beautiful birds, and we put bird feeders, and
that's very nice.
And they've got the little fountain, and I find that very soothing. Just listening to the sound of water.
The sound of water
in the background.
So
that's
the 9 months of planning is you've put in all of this construction. How long did it take?
So we built it in 2 phases.
All right.
Because at that time, we were building on, so outside of Foxhole Court, it was a dirt road. It doesn't look at all like what it looks like
I remember.
now. And also it was a residential area. And Roma, and now town has really moved sort of this side of town towards with Roma Park, Foxhole Residential, Foxhole Forest here, even the Ingwera, and just all the roads that have all opened up. But it wasn't like that, 12 years ago when we started building. So it was a gamble. It was a huge gamble. We were building in a residential area. We're now building small office space. We were combining office space with shops, which also hadn't really been done before.
Yes.
And I was 23, so I don't know. It was a lot of like.
It helps when you're young, because I think when you're young, you're able to take the risks that at this age now you would probably be looking at it very differently. There would be more analysis than when you're 23. You're more like, let's just go for it.
Exactly. There's more fear as you get older, and commitments and school fees and can I obligations.
That's true. That's true.
So. So literally, So it was 9 months. I couldn't have done it in less time than that. And it was starting completely from scratch, completely vertical learning curve. I never worked in construction. My background had been fashion.
So tell me, what were your challenges? What was your biggest challenge building Foxdale? So during the construction, what was your biggest challenge?
Well, I think it's in Zambia. I think the challenge that all property developers have. I think I think maybe the biggest challenge that most property developers have is finance. I was very lucky in that sense. They say when you're an entrepreneur, you go to fools, friends, and family. Yes. And my mom is my biggest friend and family, and she's the wisest woman I've ever come across. But she helped me with that finance. So I was very lucky that I didn't have that challenge, which is probably the biggest. But otherwise, the next challenges you have, it's unfortunately what hinders us as property developers. It's red tape through the whole system. It's ZESCO, it's water, it's sewage, it's planning permission. Unfortunately, that's what it's like. Really hard to break through with that. So that was challenging. That was challenging. Just getting all your the municipal services
there
in place, and it's always a challenge. I mean, when we have to go through 12 hours, 14 hours of load shedding, and you suddenly, I think as Zambians, we have built up such a thick skin that take us to any crisis center, a Zambian, and we will find a way. We'll sort it out. Because I think we're like constantly, in working under a point of crisis.
Yeah, and it's interesting that you talk about municipalities, approvals, and things like that, because I think a lot of people, you were correct in saying finance. You know, a lot of people would think it's actually the construction process, the actual building, but it's actually the approval processes that take long to get your ZESCO connection, your water connection, your sewer. Before we wrap up part one of our very insightful and inspiring discussion, Foxdale Court is green. Tell us about the decision, why you decided to go green, how much it cost you, and looking back now, would you have done it any differently?
Yeah, so when I started building the building, the plan wasn't actually to build a green building, a sustainable building. I really didn't know that much about sustainable buildings, and it happened when we finished the building. So we've built the first phase in 11 months. The second phase was built in 13 months. But when we finished the first phase, it's the landlord's responsibility to manage the waste.
Yes.
And so SPA opened, and literally they had a mountain like a 40-ton tipper truck type mountain of waste that came out. And when I looked at that waste, it was cabbages and tomatoes, and there were cardboard boxes, and there was lots of plastic there as well. And I looked at it and I went, oh my goodness, this can be recycled. You know, why are we just throwing it out? We had to just load it, because it was all suddenly mixed all together. We had to load it in this huge truck and send it off to the dump site. And I just said, you know, we're not going to do that. We need to do it differently. Yes. And so I'd come across Glenda from Giovanna Services, who's very green, and then we worked with her on buying composting machines. And I was able to convince SPA to go 50-50 with us. We only bought 2 to begin with, because they are quite expensive. But you know, sometimes when you just pitch a really good idea at the CEOs, like, hi, you know, let's go 50-50 on it, they'll be like, okay, sure, let's give it a shot. So that sort of helped us to sort of at least start that journey. And then we just went around, found different companies that can recycle paper and plastic as well. I remember just telling my driver, I just gave him a whole load of different plastic things, containers and the hard plastic that your water's encased with, and I said, just drive around to every single plastic company and just find out who can recycle this stuff. I was like, there must be someone who can recycle. And he did that, and he came back. He's like, yeah, Nampak, we can take it to Nampak. They collected, you know, and at that time they weren't paying you, but as the years have gone by, there are lots of companies now that are recycling plastic. They pay you a bit more if it's washed, get a little bit less if they have to wash it themselves. And so it's just been a journey, you know. It's just it's been it's 10 years. So Foxhole Court is 10 years old now.
I saw that.
And it's been a good 10 years of just constantly doing those small little gradual changes. Last year we found a company that can recycle tin. So that was really exciting. It's like, great, one more product that you can get recycled. And then it's constant training as well. So for me, it is just a passion. And you know, it's not that it doesn't make us any money at all. You do get paid something. So if we have a full-time waste manager in our waste management area, and if what we collect, if we can pay for his salary, that's great. But you know, it's not, at least for us, it's not sort of, we're not making money out of it. But it's, for us, it's really just a passion, because I just feel there's no other way that I just personally wouldn't be able to sleep at night if we were just sending all our waste to the landfill.
No, I mean, the landfills are huge, and they're getting bigger and bigger.
And so we do lots of training with our staff, with our tenants as well, because that's really where it starts from. So I normally do biannual training with the whole building. We welcome the public to come through as well for the training, and that's kind of where it starts. It starts from separating the waste from the source. So you need to separate it from.
I noticed you have
from your
bins.
Little bins.
You've got the different bins with the different colors. You've got blue, you've got yellow, you've got green lids, and people, you can see that, okay, you put your plastic in here, you put your paper in there, and food waste. No, that's excellent. What would your advice be? What would you tell somebody who says, Angelika, I want to embark on this journey? You inspired me so much. I watched you, and I really want to be able to go into property development. What would your advice be to that person?
I mean, obviously, with COVID, with the state of our economy at the moment, we haven't come out of our recession. It started 6 years ago, 22nd of June 2015 is when we had the load shedding. That's when it
Yes.
started, and that's when, unfortunately, our economy went
down, yes.
into a recession. We haven't come out of that yet. It will
Yes.
come, because all economies have cycles. So I think it is a challenging environment to get into, whatever you go into at the moment, and post-COVID as well. But I think with all of it, you need to think out of the box. You
Yes.
need to think niche. You need to think innovative, and I think that's also what we have done as
Yes.
well. And so I'd hugely encourage. I think the fact that we are green as well, with both Foxdale Court and Foxdale Forest, and just doing things differently, just challenge the big boys,
Yes.
with Monday. I was never going to build like a strip mall type
Yes.
thing, and I think if we had built, I don't think it would be as as beautiful, and I think even as successful, if we had just done
Yes.
some, look at what your friend is doing next door and just paste it on whatever
Paste it
you're
on,
doing.
yes,
I
yes.
think try to look into yourself and do something that is really you. And if you bring out what is really you, it will be a success.
It will be a success.
Because
that is.
you put all your passion and your love and your sort of drive into it, and then people buy into your
passion, your
wacky
drive.
concept. Foxdale
at
Forest, we just like no cutting trees, no generators, no and people are like, yes, no generators, I love it. Love the trees. Yes, I love the butterflies. And so this development has also been successful, given that we also launched it during a time of recession.
Yes, and that was very brave.
And various challenges, because I think people are looking for something different and sort of bringing things closer to nature. So something that creates life, brings people together, and I think definitely the whole green side, the whole world. The vision is
going green.
Is go green.
Let's go green.
So I think I do feel we have been a pioneer in the whole green
Yes.
construction within Zambia, but I think definitely make your buildings green. And more companies now have parameters that they want to be in a green building.
Well, I think people are becoming more conscious about the environment than they were before. But we'll pick that up when we start talking about Foxdale Forest in part 2.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Angelika. Thank you everyone for watching so far. So we have part 2 where we will talk about Foxdale Forest, where we are located right now. Thank you very much.